Now I would like to open the time for questions and answers. Please put your questions into the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. And DS Mike Harold will read the questions, and the district superintendents will respond.
So one question that came in during the SPRC portion, but I also think it relates to what DS Sunhee just shared, is about a church that's using the single board model and the implications for that in terms of the pastor becoming equivalent to a CEO and being primarily responsible for staff. So if one of you would like to speak to the appropriateness of that or pitfalls of that.
I will speak a little bit and then maybe Mary can do the rest. And so different members kind of have their area of responsibility. That will be helpful. So while there's a board chair, that I've seen a member kind of overseeing the trustee side of it more. You know, they're more expert in that. And then another member is more overseeing the responsibility of the SPRC. So they're kind of acting as the SPRC chair. So it's not all about that the board chair will have to carry all of the reporting of the SPRC.
I think that another part of that question is, what responsibility does the pastor have for other hired staff? And I think it's very important to understand that while the pastor may have supervision in terms of giving tasks to, let's say, an administrative assistant, or work side by side with a music director or a choir director, for example, that it's the SPRC that actually employs those people in the church. So I don't think the pastor should step into the role of being sort of the CEO, but rather be part of a collaborative team of leaders of the church. And that sometimes it's a pitfall for SPRCs to kind of hand over supervision, hiring, and firing of staff to the pastor, but that's not the pastor's role.
Yeah, basically I agree. It is optimal to have a separate function of nominations and separate function of SPRC. And of course, the pastor's input will be valuable for guidance. Mm-hmm. But it is basically the SPRC who can hire and fire persons.
Okay, thank you. So Sharon asks, do we have an expert related to helping churches develop and vet their safe gathering, safe sanctuary policies? There are churches reviewing their current policy and have some questions. So I think they're looking for who can they direct some of those questions to as it relates to their safe sanctuary, safe gatherings policies in their local churches.
I'm wondering, Diane, do we have a place on our administration part of the website that gives some guidance about that?
Hey, I've just joined in. So about safe sanctuary?
Yeah, about a local church safe gathering, safe sanctuary policy. So not about folks who are working with vulnerable adults and children and youth taking the course, but rather setting a local church policy. Do we have examples of that on our website?
Well, why don't we just plan on posting our resources on the risk management page of the four churches finance and administration website page. So there's already some insurance information there. There's already AB 506 information there, so we can add the safe sanctuary stuff there.
Okay, that's great. Once again, the website is a treasure trove of information, and as you can see, as soon as you ask for it, Diane's saying, we'll get that posted up there so that you have resources.
All right, Diane, I think this next one is for you. Can you explain the differences in treasurer, financial secretary, and chair of the finance committee roles?
Sure. Well, the chair of the finance committee is obviously chairing a committee. The committee's role is to supervise the treasurer and the finance secretary and to make decisions around financial issues for the church. So the chairperson is going to be chairing that group, making sure it convenes, making sure that it has the information it needs, and providing supervision for the treasurer and the financial secretary. Financial secretary has a very specific job around making sure that all the income, the offering in particular, gets deposited and recorded properly to the right contributor. So they will be the ones that would be recruiting counters every Sunday to count the offerings. They would also be in charge of making sure the deposits get made and recorded properly. Usually they would just be handing the church treasurer some kind of document that shows how much that deposit was and how it should be recorded in the general ledger. But they're not handing the treasurer any information about who gave what. They're just giving the treasurer information about how to book that into what categories of income maybe that deposit was. And then the treasurer is doing the books. Most of the time, the treasurer is doing the books, creating the checks, may or may not be signing the checks, but they would be a person that would normally be authorized for the bank account so that they could talk to the bank and get questions answered around what they're seeing on the bank statement. So the treasurer it's possible you could have a hired person doing the books, but the treasurer would be supervising that person.
Okay. So Diane, this next one is also you, but I think you answered it with what you just shared, but I'll ask it so you can maybe emphasize it further. Can the treasurer or finance secretary also serve as the finance committee chair?
No, they should be different people chairing finance committee and being treasurer and being financial secretary. Okay. Because the finance committee needs to give oversight to those other two things.
All right, move on to an SPRC question. What techniques might be considered for responding to people who want only to share info or share things anonymously with SPRC? What techniques might be considered for responding to people who only want to engage anonymously with SPRC?
I think it's really important for your SPRC to set a policy that is based in a Christian understanding that we live as community together and that we're responsible to each other, and to be just really clear that we're about living together peacefully and creating as much harmony and creating as much impact in our community as we can, and that anonymous complaints are not going to heal relationships or solve problems. And I think it's that simple. It's not even a technique. It's just saying our policy is that we want to bring people together in good, powerful, positive relationships. And so therefore, we do not accept anonymous complaints. Here's what I know. If there's something worth complaining about, somebody will be willing to step up and say, I will be the one who will communicate with the SPRC and the pastor about that. If it doesn't rise to the level of somebody being willing to be in a conversation about it, then really it's not something that you need to be concerned with.
Marion, can I add a little bit of cultural differences here?
Please.
Yeah. So I have experience in an Asian community, is that not anonymous complaint per se, but I have sometimes work with a lay leader to to talk with the person to convey some message to me anonymously to go back and talk to them, encourage them to do. But most of the times that they are not comfortable, maybe talk to the pastor one-on-one or come forward to
Mhm.
talk to one-on-one. So reveal who they are, but let the lay person to deliver a message. You know, if
That
the
works,
person is,
right?
yeah, if the person is, so it's owning it, not anonymous, but also in some culture, it's kind of hard to talk to pastor one-on-one. Um, any net, I mean, in my case it was like not even a negative one in my book, but still they were very uncomfortable, you know, to say that. So even to suggest to pastor to, you know, so I would that brought out some
That works.
positive relationship building. So I would consider that. Yeah.
And I think what Sunny's really speaking to also is that we have to realize that because we are such a culturally, ethnically, language diverse community of United Methodists in our conference, that we need to be sensitive to both direct and indirect forms of communication.
Right.
And so also, you know, as an SPRC, you can invite somebody who's maybe uncomfortable talking with the pastor one-on-one, that the chair or some other member of the SPRC can accompany them, or do it in this indirect way that is not anonymous.
Right.
It's simply indirect.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's in part a training, you know, it's a learning opportunity for them to be not to be, does not have to be anonymous. And so for them to be able to speak up in, in their own way, but allows them to avoid perhaps a direct,
Well,
it feels sometimes too direct, you know, because they
right,
see the
right.
power difference. They see that as a power difference. Yeah.
And the reason that we don't want anonymous complaints is because so this person doesn't like something that's happening. How can this person, the pastor, or anybody who's on staff, or even in the SPRC, work with this person to find out, what role might you want to play in shifting this in a way that feels like it'll work better? Like it's about teamwork, right? And if it's just anonymous, you don't ever learn what's at the core of the issue, and you can't work together.
So another person is asking for guidance about a youth being a member of SPRC, given the confidential nature of the work of that committee at times. So any guidance on that?
Well, I've had youth on my SPRCs before. I think it's just important to gauge the maturity level of the youth. And also, I think so it's fine to keep standards of confidentiality with the youth, but maybe also have the chair or maybe the lay leader on SPRC be designated as somebody that the youth can talk to after the meeting in case anything came up that was needing more context or needing more information, or they need to talk about the emotional impact of it. So that the youth doesn't leave the meeting and feel like they need to debrief with friends or family. Because I think a lot of times we're just used to, as adults, big things being dealt with in an SPRC, for example, and we may not be aware of the emotional impact that might be having on the young person. But I haven't had any problems with confidentiality with that. If anything, it's been some of the older people who've had a hard time keeping confidentiality.
I don't know if I would say that you know, because if they're less than 18 years old, even though with a young adult, I would talk with the parents if there's some conflict, you know, very highly sensitive or highly conflict situations and that and that maybe that this youth would be excused because we don't want them to feel hurt by, to respected members of the community that they've known and grown, and then they got into some sort of huge conflict. So I think you use sound judgment. We want their perspective, but we need to protect them as well. So
Okay.
Samuel, did you want to say something?
No.
You accidentally put your hand up.
So Bon asked the question, we're in the process of chartering a new church in July. Will the conference be establishing an EIN for the new church? When will we be able to access the 503c3 letter so we can start looking into opening a bank account? Or are those all things that don't happen until after chartering?
Diane, I'm going to kick that to you. I have a feeling that this is one of my friends from Clovis.
I would suggest that the church that is about to be chartered move ahead with the paperwork to be incorporated. And they can get online right now and get an employer identification number. And then even before they're chartered, they can be created and they can have a status with the General Counsel on Finance and Administration that can get them under the 501c3 group ruling. So I don't think we need to wait till July to make any of those things happen.
Excellent. I would say, dear sir, that you should be in touch with your DS and that person's administrative assistant, and we can help walk you through that. Isn't that exciting to have a church being chartered?
So the next question, I'm going to answer it, but you all can jump in if you think I'm wrong. So does the pastor get the vacation pay if they do not take the full vacation allotment? And my answer is no. You either use it or you don't get it. Does that sound right, fellow
right.
superintendents? Okay.
Take your vacation.
A question about, can you be more specific as to the position makeup of the single board model?
and by position, makeup of the.
I think like who's on it, how it's structured, I guess, by positions.
Yeah. So the easiest way to look at that is your current church council definitely replace the finance SPRC trustees. Nomination will be separate. Having said that, depending on the size of the church, your current church council membership will be too large for it to be a single board. So remember, we want a streamlined and efficient in the decision making, and we want that single board more focused on decision making and vision casting and alignment. That's basically the key words there, not sharing the report. So if your church has a lot of ministry team, again, kind of church council replace all of these 3 committees, but ministry team chairs, not all of them has to be remain in the single board. Does that make sense? So that you imagine your church council, but not everyone to be a membership of a single board. You might lose some of the ministry team chair, but instead, the newly formed members are become a liaison and bridge between the ministry team and the single board. So the membership will be anywhere from 7 to 15. 15 is too large in my opinion, but 7 to 9 or 7 to 12. But within it, you must have chair, you must have a secretary, you must include a lay leader, you must include a lay delegate to the annual conference.
And also you need to include minimum number of SPRC, minimum number of nomination and trustees, and not separate, but one person can do multiple functions.
Yeah, I recommend that divided up the areas of responsibility. So let's say you have 12 people, that you might want to have 3 people primarily responsible and working at SPRC, and maybe 3 people primarily working on trustees. And another question I get is if they have a lot of trustee work, how does that happen? I always say you can remain trustee team, but you have a 2 or 3 people from the current trustees to sit on the single board to work closely with. Because a lot of times the churches, the trustee members, I don't know about you, but in my churches that I've served, it's like, Pastor, I will do whatever you ask me, change the light bulbs and things like that. I'm a doer, but I don't want to sit on the meetings, you know? So you might have a wonderful trustee team of people who care for the facility, but who does not want to sit in and dealing with all these meetings and minutes and decisions. That free them to do that. But then you have some core group of people in the single board, 2 or 3, to be mainly responsible for the trustee areas.
So we have several questions about, the time moving quickly and people not necessarily getting all the information as we go along and wanting kind of, where do I find this? I know we're recording this, so is it safe to say that we will make this recording available to everyone at
Yes.
some point in the next couple of days, just for ongoing reference? Okay, so we'll do that. So just know that if there are pieces that slipped by you because we were moving too fast, you will get a copy of the recording. And then you can also always follow up with your district office with the administrative assistant there as well. Okay. Diane, can you say a little bit about what the retention schedule is for old payroll records? How long do churches need to hold on to those?
7 years. 7 years for payroll records, and then you want to make sure you get them all shredded. But that's the timeline for which a person could be audited by the IRS. So that's the reason for the 7-year guideline.
Okay. Let's see. Marty says they love the single board model. They have a shrinking congregation. If we are interested in following this model, should we come up with a couple of different organizational proposals about how to do it and present it to the conference for review? Would this be something that would begin in 2027 if approved? So essentially, how should they start kind of thinking about how to do this?
You don't have to wait 2027 to start. The beautiful thing is you can start a conversation now, talking with your key leaders and pastors, work it out, some of the different models. The beauty is you can be flexible. You can tailor to your context and what works for your church. If you have any questions, talk to your DS, and DS has talk with a lot of churches who has gone through it. So maybe it will be able to guide you better. And then when I would suggest that you communicate. You don't want anybody to, oh, I never heard about that, I never knew. Then it's kind of, not so good. So you wanna get as much as a buy-in and talk about what they look like, and even invite some of the pastors who has gone through it and ask a bunch of questions. When you feel ready, do the charge conference. Once you charge conference, boom, you can leave into a single board model. You don't have to wait until New Year to do that. You don't even need to do the staffing proposals. It's really up to your pastor and leadership. And if you feel like you're ready and you have communicated enough to the church members and you think that you can, move into that changes and have a charge conference, boom, the next day you can have a single board model.
All right. Where do I find the pastoral SPRC leadership assessment forms? How do I upload it? I could not find it on the website.
So it's on the people portal, right? And I will try to find it and put it up at the chat.
Thank you, Sunny. And when in doubt with any of those kinds of questions, be in touch with your district administrative assistants. We have a very talented group. They are there to help and to get you access to the things that you need. Email is usually the best way to be in touch with those folks because they do get wrapped up on the phone. and things. So if you go to the conference website to the district tab and go to the district and you click on your appropriate district, you'll see there the contact email for your district AA. Did you find it, Sunny?
Yes, I just answered it on the Q&A.
So is there a checklist for combining committees when churches merge? Is there a resource that provides that kind of information?
There now, Sunny, I don't know if you're sort of the merge queen. Every merge is contextual and slightly different. So while there would be like general guidelines, I would say because DSs are deeply engaged in merges, that your best bet is to talk it through with your DS. But is there a resource for that also, Sunny?
You know, I think that I would say is one of the insight. I think that you need to have a in-depth conversation with DS that will be most helpful. But what I will highlight at this point is I've seen one case of merger that was very successful is because they had an intention to merge, but they taken the time, almost a year, for both the leadership to talk about the many things. They started out talking with vision and mission, you know, because I think the mission of why they want to be together, they need to guide all the conversation that follows. Because I do not recommend you to start it out talking about practical things such as finance or structures, and often that, you know, we're human, we have different opinions. We have 100 people, there are 100 different opinions, and sometimes that doesn't give a good positive spirit of two wonderful congregations wanting to coming together. But when you started out mission and purpose, that often that sets a tone for the rest. So start with that, and then structure wise, so that they form a task force from the both congregation leaders. Yeah, and then the task force with a smaller numbers of like maybe 6 to guide this transition. And they talked about different ways of structures and how many people from different congregations should be part of it, who in their roster of leadership will be a good for different places. So they adjust, they talk. So it does not have to be all 50-50 in terms of number of people who each committees, but they get really talked through and place the right people in the right committee, and then follow finance, you know. So they, by the time that when I got there to do the charge conference for merger, it was more of a celebration. It was wonderful.
Right. So the next question, I'm going to combine two. It relates again to single board, and it's kind of asking about the role of the chair of that board. So can the chair of the single board also serve as the equivalent of the chair of the trustees or the equivalent of the chair of the finance committee? Or should those lead people be different than whoever the chair is of the overall unified board?
Maybe Diane, you can jump in, but this is my understanding is that we call board, so single board. So since this single board replace or combine trustees, finance, and SPRC in a typical basic model, that board chair is the trustee chair. The trustee is a legal representation of the church, right? So any legal document that board of trustee chair needs to sign it, and that in the state of information, it's the CEO is a board of trustees currently. So the single board chair should be listed as a CEO as well as, you know, replacing trustee chair. Having said that, I think that finance chair does not have to be finance chair as well. Again, there are other people can represent that part of the responsibility. Is that correct, Diane? That's my understanding.
Well, I'm not familiar with the discipline around the single board, but it makes sense to me that the chair of the single board would be the chair of the president of the corporation, just like the president of the trustees would have been. And I agree that that person doesn't have to fill the role of the finance committee chair.
Okay, great.
Okay. Any guidance on how a pastor's evaluation should be handled in a single board model when that was previously conducted by a separate SPRC?
So, I mean, this is where that your own church's context matters. That I have a congregation that felt like they need a little bit more confidentiality and SPRC functions separately. So there's an alternative model is single board nomination and SPRC. That if you feel that that will be beneficial, then I would highly recommend that model for your church. I have one church that for one or another reason that no one wants to serve as SPRC. They don't like to do evaluation. They don't like to do all this report and things like that. So they were relieved to have SPRC be part, SPRC function to be part of the single board. So really up to where your churches are and what your church's, practice has been.
Yeah, when to incorporate SPRC into one board model, then we need to limit the number of SPRC members who can vote. So 9 members plus lay leader and annual conference delegate. So if you have 13 members, then somehow you need to deal with the extra 2.
That's a good point.
Okay. This next question is about consultation between superintendents and SPRC committees around appointment making. And just, the fact that there are occasions when churches wish that there had been more consultation than they felt that they got, or there's even a perception outside the SPRC that maybe there was no consultation at all. And just the ramifications of that creates within the congregation, both in terms of being able to welcome someone new, but also their sense of connectedness and relationship to the annual conference. So anything that you can share just about, at least now, how we currently engage in that consultation work as superintendents and kind of what some of the principles and hopes and expectations are of that?
I'll start by saying that when, as part of the charge conference season, we have occasion to interact with a SPRC either on Zoom or in person, or anytime during the course of the year when we interact with the SPRC or the overall church council or the congregation. Anytime we interact, that is consultation. Now, when a change of appointment is being considered either at the request of the clergy person or at the request of the staff parish relations committee or one board, then usually the district superintendent will make an occasion to meet with the SPRC and find out with a little more specificity what kind of person they are looking for. And I would say that sometimes what happens is that the SPRC has shared what they wish for their congregation, but that sometimes after the fact, once the appointment has been made, there can be a constituency within the church that feels like my voice was not considered when this consultation took place. And that's part of the reason why I say that it's very important that the SPRC interact with and get to know the other committee members and also make themselves available and visible to the whole congregation, is so that when those interactions happen, because really every conversation is a consultation when a DS comes to a congregation, that when we interact with an SPRC, we know that the SPRC isn't just carrying their own voices, but is carrying the voice of the larger church body.
So on that regard, all SPRC members should participate in every activity in your church. You should know what other people think of the ministry and the pastor. So say if you make a decision on not only pastor, but staff person, youth staff, and you have no idea how youth is going their program, then it is problematic. And some SPRC members do not show up that often in church matters, then represent the whole church. That's problematic. So I encourage all SPRC members to attend worship services regularly and try to engage different activities that are happening in the church. Sometimes potluck, sometimes youth program, sometimes the women's program, etc. So it is important to practically represent the whole church.
And I would also say this, Mike, is that don't be, if you're an SPRC member or chair, don't be passive and wait for the DS to reach out to you, because remember that, Mike Harrell's district has 90 churches. My district, Central Valley, has 60 churches, right? If you want to have contact with me, I am eager to hear from you about your ministry needs, eager. So reach out. I'm sure I'm speaking for the others as well. I think sometimes, once again, I'll say after the fact, after an appointment has been made, there's a perception, oh, the DS never asked us. Well, please, we want to interact with you. So please reach out. Watch, my email inbox will be like full tomorrow. Why did I say that?
I also, I wouldn't say like people, it's not everything, but I've seen a case where a SPRC made a certain request, and pastors have three options, like move or stay or either, or open to whichever. And when it comes to the appointment change, there's a lot of grief, and they don't want to really share that I filled out, I checked either, or I checked, we checked this. So I sometimes find that SPRC is not very transparent with the congregations, about that, and pastors are not fully transparent with the congregation and leave. And it leaves unintentionally that, there was not enough consultation. In fact, there was some, the conversation around that. So if you see the report on the both pastor's request and SPRC request, we ask, when do you plan to talk about your recommendation for the next appointment with your pastor for SPRC? And we ask the same thing for the pastor, because we want them to be more transparent as well. Not all the cases, but we've seen some cases like that. Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say is that I'm sure all of us read through every SPRC report, end of the year report that we received. We read through it. And while you may not, it's not a conversation consultation, we take in that information as part of our understanding of the church.
Okay. Thank you. So Diane, does the statement of information need to be updated on the state's website every 2 years, even if no information is different?
In California, yes. In Nevada, you need to update it anytime there's a change, but if there's no change in 2 years, you don't need to update it. But California need to update it every 2 years, even if there's no change.
Okay. Small church with no payroll department. Is it the treasurer's responsibility to write a check for employees' salaries?
Yeah. Yes. The treasurer is the person who, if they're not doing the payroll themselves, they are hiring a firm to do it. So it definitely falls under the treasurer to make sure payroll gets done, whether through the church's own checking account or through a payroll service.
Okay. Given the nature and critical role of the SPRC, is there such a thing as non-disclosure agreements for members serving on the committee? Is that something that we have asked for or implemented?
Nope. It's all the honor system.
Okay. This is another single board question. When we talk about doing that for a smaller church, what's the metric that we're using when we say smaller church? Like, is that something we're recommending for like under 200? What do we mean by smaller church when it comes to the single board model?
I would say, sometimes the membership is hard. I would say active engagement. The people with active engagement of less than 50 should really consider. But then you will have a lot of overlapping leadership. People have a multiple leadership role or have to fill out. But even the less than 100 might benefit. I have one church that was definitely 100 or above. They just went to single board because want to free a lot of people in the engagement of mission and community outreach instead of being in a decision-making body. So
someone mentions that they're using Mission Possible as a guide for the single board model. So throw that out there as a possible resource, Mission Possible. But they're also asking, are there other resources in the conference related to coaching for the further evolution of the single board model?
we don't have a one designated person. Start with the DS. Again, I have connected with a pastor who's thinking about doing it, where the pastor has gone through it in the nearby, and then make that connection. So this pastor became some sort of mentor and coach to how to walk with, and even come to the church to answer any questions. So sometimes that may be even a better resource. So I would just say that for now.
And also you can Google single board model, and a bunch of different conferences in our connection will pop up with resources that they have. And it's really kind of fun to consider all the different ways that you can organize yourself so that you are mission forward. That's why that booklet's called Mission Possible. It's so you're mission forward instead of sort of administration forward.
Okay. This next question, I think, is just trying to clarify whether they understood something correctly earlier. And that is, did we say that it's possible for the treasurer and the finance secretary to not be on a single board model, that they don't have to be?
No, they can attend the single board. All I mentioned was that if they are paid staff, they don't have vote.
Got it. Got it. And the finance chair should be part of a single board model.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Diane, this is another retention question. How long ought a church keep copies of checks for expenses, finance information on capital campaigns, financial giving records?
Really, it's 7 years for everything. The only permanent things would be minutes to trustees meetings, a final year-end financial statement, the minutes to your charge conference, but everything other than those things, which are permanent, everything else is 7 years.
Okay. This next question has to do with sexual harassment training. I'm assuming it's talking about the training mandated at least by the state of California. That is every 2 years, I think. And it's asking who's required to do that training? Who's required to undergo that sexual harassment training?
Well, in the context of AB 506, well, maybe that's not the right context. I'm not sure, because I don't think it's under the AB 506. I know if you're the custodian of record for the AB 506, you're getting some training every year. But the sexual harassment training, I'm just going to have to get back to you through the website on that. It's an HR related question that's specific to each of our states, I think, and I'll have to find out the answer to that.
I think in California, it's any staff member has to do it. And then there's a separate module for anyone that's a supervisor that's different. and
Right.
longer. So I believe in California, it's all paid staff have to do it with the supervisors, those with supervisory responsibilities doing a specific one tailored to that.
I
Is
have
that
a
every year?
website.
I think it's
No,
every
yeah,
two.
every
Every
2 years. I have a
Okay.
website that provide the training, online training. I have a, can I put it
Yeah,
in the Q&A? I think it passed. Mike, I'll put it on the chat. Can you put it on to the people? So this website, if you go there, so I think Diane, I mentioned it that the under our risk management,
mhm,
there's a sexual harassment training that we need to do that's more than 5 employees, so
mhm.
the California has this website that you can have your
Yes.
employee to go in, and if you're supervisory, that you need to click on supervisory. If you're just a regular employee,
Yes.
and then it shows a training. And I think it's free, but if you go through it and if you answer some questions, then it would give you some sort of certificate electronically. You have done that. So
Yeah.
I have done that with I mean, it was not this program. I paid program before, but I asked a new employee to have gone through that training, and once you've given us a certificate, that will start the employment, things like that. So you can implement that. But go to that risk management in our website or the document that I show you. It has a link to that.
So this one is a big question, but an important one. How do we practice and establish internal and external oversight teams to review governance, financial management, and administrative practices to reduce the risk of error or misconduct and to reinforce best practices of different churches?
I love that
Thoughts on
question
that?
because that's a question that comes from somebody who really cares.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I would say, Mary, is that I would say that the pastor is the chief administrative officer.
So I was just going to say that. Yeah.
It's an impossible task when you read the roles and responsibility of the elder. But one of the big part is we are appointed to order the church, to give administrative support. I always say to pastors, you are not micromanaging. You don't have to do that. You can delegate, you supervise, and you don't have to reconcile the books and things like that. But make sure that you are a supervisor to be on top of it, things are going, so this question is in some ways, I know we're asking a lot of pastors, but we often do not have a right skill set, but yet that you need to approach this work as if you so that's why the single board and church council, you make sure that the things that need to be pay attention to is work properly. If not, you need help, talk to the Diane or DS and things like that, and what can we do to strengthen that side of the ministry, but we also, your lay leaders and other capable lay persons are great partners to you, so you don't have to do all of that, your finance chair and everybody, but so they will do that supervising with you and give you help, but you can delegate the work. But I think that it is my responsibility as a pastor to check in with all of the chairs,
Mm.
so that you give them a support from the perspective of a United Methodist Book of Discipline, because they really look to you for those kind of resources, or connect with the conference resource as well. So it's a both and, but I mean, that's kind of what I can give you at this time. And of course, like Diane, it would be a wonderful help. You can always email her and call her.
I also think that if you have a practice of at least a quarterly review of your your systems of order, your finances, and your legal obligations and your paperwork, and you're making sure that your officers are up to date. If you have a quarterly practice of that, that also helps to mitigate malfeasance, because we know that churches where there's neglect of oversight with finances, lead us not into temptation, right? It's why Costco always has you show your receipt at the door. That's because the very fact that they're asking prevents shoplifting from happening. So it's not that they catch shoplifting, it's that the practice prevents it from ever happening or not happening as often. So yeah, most of us are not called to like, oh, I want to do the administrative part of this. I mean, we have a heart for ministry, right? Whether you're a lay person or a clergy person, but it's just part of just a really good practice to care for this body that we've been given. What do you think, Samuel? You love that stuff, don't you?
Yeah, the basic things. If we do a financial report every quarterly, that will prevent lots of malfeasance and wrong things. So do it regularly and transparent.
Another thing that I want to say is use commonly used programs such as QuickBooks, because the learning curve for the new members, it will be hard if you use some unknown program. I've seen some churches using a program that's developed for church, but nobody kind of familiar with that. And that ended up, there's no malpractice, but people relying on this one person who knows how to read it, the report it generates, and that is not very healthy. So.
Yeah, I would just add that, well, another thing you have to do is make sure your church has your audit every year. And the audit program that our conference, the CFA, distributes for the use of doing a church audit is really a good guide for the kinds of things that need to be in place. It's partially a checklist to make sure you have the right number of people counting the offering. There's lots of checklists within it. So the audit itself, in our conference, we have a document that can be helpful for the financial management and governance, I think.
And that can be found on our website, right? Under finance and administration.
Yes, it's unique to our conference. So it's not the same thing as the GCFA audit program.
Yeah, of course, it will be optimal to hire extra CPA to do the audit, but small churches cannot afford it. So it is good for each small church share their finance chair or treasurer to audit the other church, each other, every 2 years or 3 years, something like that, and that will be better and practical.
Then do we have a quick sheet information reference to look for new state labor laws each year and anything churches may need to know in terms of adjusting or adding to policies? Like, do we have kind of a handy dandy parking spot for all of those changes, particularly in HR labor laws that come every year?
We don't have anything on our website that's that specific, but I would suggest everyone get their yearly update from our insurance broker, Heffernan. They do webinars all the time around HR things. And so if you go to the Heffernan Brokers website, you can look through all of their webinars and recorded webinars, and you can get the information you need for an HR update every year.
Yeah, I do have this link. Again, Mike, I need your help. I'll just put in the host and panelist. The Cal Chamber for California. So that that's this particular one is about California independent contractor versus employee laws, but there are a lot of information around that. So maybe that website is resourceful.
That's a good website to get your posters from for your HR posters.
Yep. And supposed to have a like update and news was supposed to be on it. So if you are interested in look for that update. Yeah.
Is there a resource guide for grant writing that we know of that we can name for folks?
Because each grant asks for quite particular things, I think it would depend on the grant itself. I think in terms of grant writing, the most important thing for that is get the grantor exactly the information they are looking for and take your time. Don't think that you can turn a grant around in just a few days, because some of the details that they need take a really long time to do. I'm not aware that we have anything that's UMC specific for grant writing, but obviously if you need help getting specific data points to include in a grant, contact the district administrative assistant to see if they can help you with that. Plus, I mean, honestly, if you just like Google search the kind of grants you're looking for, you can spend all day finding grants that are possible for you as a nonprofit or as a church.
Then there's a question about, again, goes back to the unified board. Does the admin chair or trustee chair also need to serve as the SPRC lead, or can that be someone different?
I think the same thing as the finance chair, that the single board chair needs to act as a trustee board chair, but finance chair or SPRC chair, can other members function as that. I'll also address the nomination committee necessary. I think is also for the nomination, the single board, that we want to make sure that turnover happens every 3 years. We don't want the same people to stay on a single board forever and ever and no end. So we want the nomination. We call nomination, but actually the official nomination and lay leadership development, right? So we want a separate committee to be able to look at the whole congregation and be intentional about who to bring on and training and to step up as a leader. So while your current group of leadership may be very strong and important, we want to make sure that that turnover happens, so that also the burnout and fatigue is a real thing, so we want people to give a little break, and then we want to have new people to come in. So that's why we recommend having the nomination committee separately.
Yeah, I have two things to say about it. The first is that it is awkward for you to self-nominate each year. And another practical thing is that there might be some husband or wife in the same board. Then, it is fairness issue. You have two voices instead of one. So it is good to have a nominating committee separately.
And I did just put those two links from Dia Sun-hee in the chat to everybody. So if you haven't been paying attention to that other chat page, those are sitting there for you. That was the last question in the Q&A, and we're right at 8:30. So